In a quiet village in the southwestern part of Nigeria, Alao and Kemi lived a simple but content life. Their home was a small mud brick house with a thatched roof, worn but sturdy. Though they had little, they had one treasure they valued above all else: their only son, Kola. From the moment Kola was born, Alao and Kemi had only one dream for him: a better future. They believed in the power of education. They had both grown up in poverty, never getting the chance to go beyond primary school. Alao worked as a subsistence farmer, and Kemi earned a living as a petty trader in the market, selling whatever she could find: vegetables, firewood, or sometimes just bags of water to thirsty travelers. The village had a public school, but everyone knew the quality of education there was poor. The teachers were either absent or uninterested, and many students left school barely knowing how to read or write. Alao and Kemi wanted more for Kola. They had vowed that their child would never end up like them, struggling daily just to put food on the table. They knew that a private school offered better education, and though it was costly, they were willing to do whatever it took. It wasn't just about academics. It was about securing a future where Kola could stand amongst the educated elite, get a good job, and lift them out of poverty. On a bright Monday morning, Kola walked home from school, his backpack clutched tightly to his chest. His head was bowed, his feet dragging through the dusty road. He wasn't supposed to be home. He was supposed to be in class. As he walked past a neighbor's house, an elderly woman sitting on a veranda spotted him. She squinted and frowned. "Kola, what are you doing on the road when your mates are in school?" she asked, wiping her hands on her wrapper. "They sent me away for school fees," Kola muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman shook her head in disapproval. "Oh, what a shame. Your parents just like to overdo," she mumbled. Kola felt a lump form in his throat, but he held back the tears. He knew his parents were trying their best. He wasn't angry at them. He was just tired of being embarrassed. When he got home, he found his parents sitting outside their small house, resting after the morning's labor. Their faces brightened when they saw him, but the happiness faded when they noticed his expression. "They sent me home again," he said, his voice filled with frustration. Alao and Kemi exchanged worried glances. They had been expecting this day, but they still weren't prepared for it. Alao sighed deeply. "Don't worry, my son. We will find a way." That night, the couple sat in their dimly lit room, whispering anxiously about what to do. There was no money left. Alao had barely made anything from his last harvest, and Kemi's market sales had been poor. "We have to find the money somehow," Kemi said, determination in her voice. Alao nodded. "I will go to my friend Adebayo. Maybe he can lend me something." The next morning, Alao set off for Adebayo's house. Adebayo was a longtime friend who had managed to do well for himself. When Alao arrived, he swallowed his pride and explained his situation. But instead of sympathy, Adebayo laughed cruelly. "Alao, what is a poor man's child doing in a rich man's school?" he mocked. "You want your son to sit among the children of big men? My friend, wake up from your dream." Alao felt humiliated, but he refused to let the words discourage him. He thanked Adebayo and left, his heart heavy. Kemi also tried her best. She visited an old friend and pleaded for help, but her friend only sneered. "You saw free public school, but you refused. Now you are running around begging for money," the woman said. "We that send our children to public school, we don't have sense, Abi." By the end of the day, Alao and Kemi had nothing, not a single kobo, to show their efforts. That night, Kola sat silently, watching his parents struggle with their thoughts. His heart ached for them. "I'll be fine," he said softly. "If I have to stay home for a while, I can catch up later." But Alao and Kemi shook their heads. "No, my son. Education is the only thing we can give you," Kemi said firmly. "We will not let you miss out." With no other choice, Alao and Kemi took on any job they could find. Alao humbled himself and went to work on a friend's farm, clearing weeds and cultivating heaps under the scorching sun. His own farmland suffered as a result, but he had no choice. His son's future was more important. Kemi also found work as a porter in the market, carrying heavy loads of goods for traders in exchange for a little money. When that wasn't enough, she washed clothes for rich families in the village, enduring harsh words and insults just to save a little more. It was painful, exhausting, and humiliating, but after a week of hard labor, they finally gathered enough money. When they handed Kola the school fees, he fell to his knees and held their hands. "I will never forget this," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I promise to make you proud." With a grateful heart, he returned to school determined to succeed. Even though he had missed a whole week, he worked hard to catch up, borrowing notes from classmates and staying up late to study. As months passed, the sacrifices continued. Alao and Kemi spent every kobo they earned on Kola's education. The villagers mocked them constantly. "You people are wasting your time," one woman sneered. "Instead of using your money to build a better house or start a bigger farm, you are spending everything on a child who might not even take care of you later." But Alao and Kemi ignored them. They believed in their son. Kola, on his part, worked even harder, staying at the top of his class and impressing his teachers. Someday, he whispered to himself, "I will show everyone that my parents' sacrifices were not in vain." But fate had its own plans, and no one knew what lay ahead. Despite the struggles his family faced, Kola never lost focus. He knew how much his parents had sacrificed to keep him in school, and he was determined to repay their efforts with success. Every morning, he woke up before dawn, sat by the dim lantern light, and studied. His classmates often wondered how he managed to stay at the top of the class despite all the challenges at home. But Kola had only one goal in mind: to make his parents proud. His teachers admired him. "This boy has a bright future," they often said. "If only all students had his determination." At school, Kola barely had time for anything other than his studies. While other students played during breaks, he would sit under a tree, reading his notes. "Why do you study so hard?" his friend Tunde asked one day. Kola smiled. "Because my parents are suffering for me. I cannot afford to fail." Tunde shook his head. "You are lucky. My father doesn't even care whether I pass or fail." But Kola didn't feel lucky. He only felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Time passed quickly, and soon, Kola was in SS3, his final year in secondary school. His WAEC, West African Examination Council, examinations were approaching, and his parents were once again scrambling for money to pay for his exam fees. The villagers mocked them as usual. "You people never get tired," one old man laughed. "You have spent everything on this boy. What if he doesn't pass?" Kemi ignored them. "My son will pass. I know it," she said confidently. Kola could see the stress on his mother's face as she went from house to house, begging for work just to raise his exam fees. One evening, she came home exhausted, her hands covered in blisters from washing clothes for wealthy women in the village. When she handed him the money for his exams, Kola's eyes filled with tears. "Mama, you are suffering too much because of me," he said. Kemi smiled through her pain. "It is not suffering, my son. It is an investment. One day, you will succeed and everything will be worth it." With that encouragement, Kola wrote his WAEC exams with all his strength. A few months later, the results were out, and as expected, Kola had passed with flying colors. His parents wept tears of joy when they saw his results. "We told them," Alao said proudly, "our son is going to university." But their happiness was short-lived when they realized that university was going to cost even more money. With his WAEC result, the next step was JAMB, Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board examinations, which determined which university he could attend. Kola sat for JAMB, and once again, he passed with high scores. Then the best news came. He had been admitted into one of the top universities in the country to study computer engineering. His parents were overjoyed, but deep down, they were worried. "We have come this far," Alao said, "but how are we going to pay for his university education?" But Kemi, ever the optimist, refused to be discouraged. "If we could send him to private school, we will find a way to send him to university," she said. And so, the struggles continued. Sending Kola to university meant even greater sacrifices. School fees were higher, and there were other expenses: textbooks, accommodation, feeding, and transportation. Alao expanded his farm work, taking on extra labor on bigger farms. He worked from morning to night, his hands blistered from using cutlasses and hoes. Kemi worked even harder, washing clothes, carrying loads in the market, and sometimes even working as a cleaner in people's houses. At night, when they finally returned home, they would sit under the moonlight, exhausted but hopeful. "Kola must not suffer like us," Kemi said one night. "Even if I have to carry heavy loads every day, I will do it for him." Kola saw everything they were going through, and his heart ached. "I will help myself too," he told them one evening, and he did. When Kola got to university, he realized that waiting for his parents to send money was not enough. He knew how much they were suffering, and he couldn't bear to see them work so hard while he did nothing. So, he took up small jobs to support himself. He tutored other students who were struggling with their courses. He worked as a part-time cashier at a small shop near the university. On weekends, he helped carry goods at the local market for a small fee. With the little money he made, he bought his own textbooks, handouts, and food, so his parents didn't have to carry all the burden alone. But even with Kola's efforts, things were still tough. There were days he went hungry, nights when he studied without electricity, and times when he borrowed books from friends because he couldn't afford his own. Still, he refused to complain. He was determined to make it. Back in the village, the gossip about Kola's parents never stopped. "They are suffering for nothing," one man said. "All their money is going to this boy. By the time he finishes university, they will be old and penniless." Kemi heard these words, but refused to be discouraged. "Let them talk," she told her husband. "One day, they will see the reward of our sacrifice." Alao nodded in agreement. "Kola will take care of us when he succeeds. I know it." Years passed, and Kola's hard work in university never wavered. He remained focused, determined to fulfill the promise he made to his parents. By his final year, he had become one of the best students in his department. His lecturers often used him as an example to younger students, a boy from a struggling background who never allowed his circumstances to stop him. But things were far from easy. There were days he had to choose between buying food or printing assignments. Some nights he stayed awake reading with candlelight because the school's electricity was unreliable. Despite everything, he pushed forward. His parents, on the other hand, were growing weaker from their endless labor. Kemi felt pain in her joints from years of carrying heavy loads. Alao's back ached from working on the farm, but still, they refused to slow down. Each time Kola called home, Kemi assured him they were fine. "Don't worry about us, my son," she would say. "Focus on your studies." And so, Kola focused. He poured his energy into his final exams, writing each paper as if his life depended on it. When the final results were released, Kola couldn't believe his eyes. He had graduated as the best student in his department. Not only that, but he had bagged a first-class degree in computer engineering. Tears filled his eyes as he held his result in his hands. His sacrifices had not been in vain. The first call he made was to his parents. "Mama, Baba, I did it. I got a first class." On the other end of the phone, Kemi and Alao broke into tears of joy. "We knew it, my son. We knew you would make us proud," Kemi sobbed. That night, they knelt on the bare floor of their small house, thanking God for their son's success. For the first time in years, they felt like all their struggles had been worth it, but they knew this was only the beginning. Kola needed a good job to truly change their lives. As Kola prepared for NYSC, National Youth Service Corps, something happened that shocked everyone. One day, he received an email from a multinational technology company, one of the biggest firms in the country. The email read, "Dear Kola Aribisala, we are pleased to offer you a position in our company as a graduate trainee engineer. Your outstanding academic performance has caught our attention and we would love to have you on our team. You will resume immediately after your NYSC." Kola stared at the screen in disbelief. A job offered even before completing NYSC? The starting salary was more than anything he had ever imagined. When he told his parents the news, they screamed in joy. "This is God's doing," Alao shouted. Kemi fell to her knees. "Oh, my son, you have brought honor to this family." That evening, their small house was filled with neighbors who came to celebrate. The same people who once mocked them were now congratulating them. "We always knew Kola was destined for greatness," one man said. Lies. Kemi and Alao knew the truth. These were the same people who had laughed at them years ago, but they didn't care. All that mattered was that their son had succeeded. The next few months were filled with hope and excitement. Kola completed his NYSC, eager to start his new job. His parents began to dream a new house, a better life, rest from their years of struggle. Villagers looked forward to seeing how Kola would transform his family's life, but fate had its own plan. The day Kola left the village for the city, his parents stood at the roadside, watching proudly as he boarded a bus with a small traveling bag. Kemi's eyes filled with tears of joy. "My son, don't forget where you come from," she whispered as she hugged him tightly. "I will never forget, Mama." Kola promised, "I will take care of you and Baba." Alao patted his son on the shoulder. "Go and make us proud." And with that, Kola left for the city, ready to start his new life as a working class man. The city was everything he had dreamed of: tall buildings, busy streets, flashing lights, and an air of opportunity. His new workplace was a massive glass building filled with professionals in neat suits and polished shoes. His salary was mouth-watering. This is a life, Kola thought. No more struggles, no more suffering. But something changed. At first, he sent money home, small amounts, just enough to keep his parents from calling too often. Then, the calls became fewer. Then the money stopped completely. Alao and Kemi waited patiently for their son to send money home. At first, they thought maybe he is still settling down. But months passed and nothing. Each time Kemi called, Kola had the same excuse. "Mama, life in the city is expensive. My salary isn't enough." Yet, in the city, Kola was living lavishly. He moved into a luxurious apartment in a high-rise building. He bought expensive clothes, watches, and perfumes. He started attending parties, drinking expensive wine, and spending money on women. His new friends were all rich city boys, and he wanted to fit in. Whenever he remembered his parents, he pushed the thoughts aside. "I will send them money next month," he always told himself. But next month never came. Back in the village, nothing had changed for Alao and Kemi. Alao still worked on the farm, his back bent from years of hard labor. Kemi still carried loads in the market, her hands rough from washing clothes for people. Their house was still the same old mud house, leaking whenever it rained. Yet, their son was earning a fortune in the city. The villagers began to talk. "We heard Kola works in a big company now," one woman said. "Why are his parents still suffering?" Another man laughed. "After all their sacrifices, this boy has abandoned them. Foolish parent." Kemi ignored the gossip, but deep inside, she was heartbroken. "My son will never forget us," she told Alao one night. Maybe he is just busy. But Alao wasn't so sure anymore. One evening, after struggling to buy food, Kemi picked up her phone and dialed Kola's number. It rang and rang until it went to voicemail. She tried again. No answer. Alao sighed. "He is too busy for us." Kemi refused to give up. She tried again the next day, and this time he picked up. "Mama, I'm in a meeting," Kola said impatiently. "My son, we need help," Kemi said softly. "Things are hard. Your father and I have not eaten today. Can you send us something?" Kola sighed loudly. "Mama, I told you things are expensive in the city. I don't have much left after paying my bills." Kemi felt a sharp pain in her chest. But Kola, even a little will help. After a long silence, Kola finally said, "I will send you something later." Kemi thanked him, even though she knew he wasn't struggling like he claimed. 2 days later, he finally sent money, a small amount that barely covered food for a few days. Kemi held the money in her hands and wept. Word spread quickly that Kola had abandoned his parents. Villagers shook their heads in disappointment. "This boy is truly ungrateful," an old man said. "After everything his parents did for him?" Another woman laughed. "Didn't we want Kemi? Now she is suffering for nothing." Kemi stopped going to the market often. She couldn't bear the shame. Alao, on the other hand, grew angry and bitter. "I slaved in the sun for that boy," he shouted one day. "I worked on people's farm like a servant, and now he has forgotten us." Kemi remained hopeful, but her body was growing weak, and soon something terrible happened. Months of stress, hunger, and pain finally took a toll on Kemi. One morning, as she tried to carry a heavy basket in the market, her vision blurred and she collapsed. The villagers rushed to help. "She is burning with fever," one woman said. "She needs a doctor," another added, but there was no money for a hospital. Alao, desperate and afraid, picked up his phone and called Kola. It rang and rang until Kola finally answered. "Baba, I'm busy," he said, annoyed. "Kola, your mom is sick," Alao said urgently. "She collapsed today. We need money to take her to the hospital." Kola was silent for a moment. Then he sighed. "How much?" Alao's hands trembled as he mentioned the amount. It wasn't much for someone earning Kola's salary, but Kola groaned in frustration. "Baba, I don't have that kind of money now. I will send what I can." That night, he sent a small amount, not enough for proper hospital treatment. Alao felt his heart break. His son, the one he sacrificed everything for, could not even help his own mother. He looked at his wife, lying weak on their bed, and wondered, was this what all their sacrifices had led to? The days dragged on, and Kemi's condition worsened. Her body, once strong and full of energy, grew weak and frail. The woman who had once walked the market with baskets on her head now struggled to even sit up. Her nights were filled with pain and silent tears. Her husband, Alao, watched helplessly, feeling anger and heartbreak at the same time. Their only son, the child they sacrificed everything for, was nowhere to be found. Every day, Alao tried calling Kola. Every day, the result was the same. Either Kola's phone kept ringing without an answer, or he would pick up and give another excuse. Excuses and excuses. One evening, Alao called again. This time, Kola picked up after several rings. "Baba, what is it? I'm very busy," Kola said, sounding irritated. Alao swallowed his anger. "Your mother is getting worse, Kola. She needs urgent treatment. Please, come home." Kola sighed. "I can't travel now, Baba. Work is too demanding." Alao gritted his teeth. "Then send us some money. We need to take her to the hospital." Kola was silent for a moment. Then he said, "I don't have much to spend now. Things are hard in the city." Alao felt his hands shake with fury. Things were hard? For a man earning more in a month than they had ever seen in a year? "Your mother is dying, Kola," he said, his voice breaking. Kola sighed loudly. "Baba, let's not exaggerate. She'll be fine. Just let her rest." "Rest?" Alao shouted. "She cannot even get up. She needs proper medical care." But Kola had already made up his mind. "I will send something later," he muttered. "I have to go now, Baba." The line went dead. Alao stared at the phone in disbelief. He turned to look at his wife, lying weakly on their thin mattress, her breathing slow and uneven. Tears filled his eyes. "Kemi," he whispered, his voice shaking. "We raised a stranger." Days passed, and Kemi's health grew worse. Her stomach swelled painfully, and she often clutched her side, crying out in pain. She had been vomiting frequently, sometimes bringing up blood. She could barely eat, and even when she did, she often complained of severe stomach pain. Villagers who came to visit shook their heads in pity. "She needs a real doctor," one woman said. "This looks serious." Alao knew it too, but what could he do? Kola had refused to send enough money. Kola had refused to come home. All they could do was watch and pray. Then one afternoon, hope arrived in an unexpected way. A team of medical volunteers had come to the village to provide free health services for the poor. They were part of a non-profit organization that traveled across rural communities, treating sick people who couldn't afford hospital care. When one of the doctors saw Kemi lying motionless on a mat outside her home, he immediately knew something was wrong. "This woman needs urgent medical attention," the doctor said. Alao rushed forward, desperation in his eyes. "Doctor, please help her. We have no money for treatment." The doctor knelt beside Kemi, checking her pulse and pressing gently on her stomach. Kemi groaned in pain. The doctor's face grew serious. "This is gallbladder disease," he said. "She likely has gallstones that is blocking her digestive system." Alao stared in confusion. Go what?" The doctor explained. "It's a condition where stones formed in the gallbladder, blocking bile flow. That's why she has swelling and severe stomach pain. She needs urgent surgery to remove it." Alao's heart sank. "Doctor, we don't have money," he whispered. The doctor smiled reassuringly. "That's why we are here. We will take her to the city for surgery, for free." Alao's knees almost gave out in relief. "God bless you," he whispered. "God bless you." The medical team quickly made arrangements to leave. Kemi was too weak to walk, so the doctors carefully placed her on a stretcher and loaded her into the ambulance. Alao, desperate to go with them, stepped forward. "I will come with you," he said firmly. "I need to be by my wife's side." But one of the doctors, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, gently held his shoulder. "Baba, the journey is long. We are going far and there won't be space for extra passengers," she explained. "Don't worry, Baba. We will take good care of her. She'll be fine." Alao's heart sank. But what if something happens?" His voice trembled. "We will keep you updated," the doctor assured him. "She'll be back home healthy in no time." With no other option, Alao stepped back, watching as they closed the ambulance doors. Kemi's weak eyes met his through the small window. She forced a small smile and whispered, "I'll be fine." The ambulance drove away, leaving behind a cloud of dust and a husband's silent fear. Hours later, Kemi arrived at a well-equipped hospital in a distant city. The doctors immediately ran tests, confirming what they had suspected. Her gallbladder was severely inflamed and surgery was needed immediately. Kemi was terrified, but she held on to the doctor's words. "We have handled many cases like this before," they reassured her. "You'll be fine." She was taken into the surgical room, her frail body trembling as they placed an oxygen mask over her face. The last thing she saw was a bright overhead light, then darkness. The surgery was supposed to be a simple procedure, but something went terribly wrong. During the operation, Kemi's blood pressure dropped dangerously low. She had a severe reaction to the anesthesia and her heart began to fail. The doctors tried everything. They pumped oxygen into her lungs. They administered emergency drugs. They tried to revive her again and again, but her body was too weak. Her heart stopped beating. At exactly 3:47 a.m., Kemi was pronounced dead. The next morning, The lead doctor picked up his phone and dialed Alao's number. Alao had spent the entire night praying and waiting for an update. When the phone rang, he grabbed it quickly, hopeful for good news. "Doctor, how is my wife?" he asked eagerly. There was a long silence. Then the doctor sighed heavily. "Baba, I am so sorry. Your wife didn't make it." Alao froze. His mind refused to process the words. "Didn't make it?" he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. The doctor's voice was filled with regret. "We did everything we could, but her body was too weak. She passed away during the surgery." Alao's legs gave way and he collapsed to the ground. A deep, painful wail tore from his throat. "No, no!" he screamed. His neighbors rushed to him, alarmed by his cries. He clutched his chest, gasping for air as tears poured down his face. "She is gone! My Kemi is gone!" The villagers gathered around, whispering in shock. "She didn't survive? Oh my God! What will Alao do now?" Alao sat in the dust, his heart shattered beyond repair. And then, through his blood, tear-filled vision, he remembered Kola. With shaking hands, Alao dialed Kola's number. It rang once, twice. Then Kola picked up. "Baba, what is it? I'm at work," he said, sounding impatient as always. Alao tried to speak, but his voice broke. "Kola," he whispered. Something in his tone made Kola pause. "Baba, what's wrong?" Alao swallowed hard, his body trembling. Your mother is dead." Silence. Total silence. Then Kola let out a loud, agonizing cry. "No, no, 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 no!" His chest tightened. He felt dizzy, his vision blurred with tears. His mother, the woman who raised him, who suffered for him, who prayed for him, was gone. And he was not there. Regret hit him like a thunderstorm. He fell to his knees in his luxurious apartment, sobbing uncontrollably. "Oh no, Mama," he choked. "Her death is on me. No, no, no. It's my fault. It's my fault. No. No!" But it was too late. After his mother's death, Kola was devastated. Guilt tormented him, and he knew there was only one way to redeem himself, by giving her the most extravagant funeral the village had ever seen. "If I failed her in life, I won't fail her in death," he told himself. He returned to the village with bags of money, determined to turn his mother's burial into a grand event. He renovated his father's old house, turning the once small mud brick home into a modern house with fine roofing and tiled floors. He bought new furniture, a big generator, and an expensive sound system for the funeral. He ordered the best caterers from the city, arranging for large amounts of food and drinks to be brought in. He bought expensive funeral outfits for close family members, making sure everyone looked rich and dignified on the day of the burial. He even hired traditional drummers and dancers, making sure the ceremony would be the talk of the town. His only mission was to erase his shame with wealth. But while he was busy lavishing money, his father, Alao, remained silent. Alao sat outside the house every day, staring into the space, consumed by his sorrow. No matter how many changes Kola made, no matter how much money he spent, Alao never acknowledged him. He didn't thank him for the house renovation. He didn't comment on the grand funeral plans. He didn't even look at the expensive casket Kola had ordered. To him, none of it mattered. All he wanted was his wife back, and he believed she was gone forever. The villagers, however, reacted differently. Many watched in disbelief as Kola spent millions on a burial when he had refused to send money for his mother's hospital bills. So, he had all this money but couldn't help his mother when she needed it. This is useless wealth. What's the point of money when it comes too late? Does it think a grand burial will bring her back? Women shook their heads in disappointment. Men whispered amongst themselves. Even the children sensed that something wasn't right. But Kola didn't care. He was determined to wash away his sins with wealth. The day before the burial, Kola stood in front of the renovated house, feeling proud of his work. They will forget how I neglected her. He thought, after this, everyone will respect me again. But fate had other plans. On the morning of the burial, Alao sat in his usual spot, staring at the empty road, waiting for the arrival of Kemi's corpse. His heart was heavy, but deep inside, he had made peace with one decision. After today, Kola would no longer be his son. But suddenly, his phone rang. The number was unknown. Confused, Alao picked up. "Hello," he said, his voice weak. "Hello, Baba Kola," the caller said. "This is Dr. Samuel from the hospital." Alao froze. "Doctor?" he whispered. "What is it?" The doctor sighed. "Baba, I have something very important to tell you. Please listen carefully." Alao's heart pounded. "Something happened," the doctor said. "After Kemi was declared dead, the nurses began preparing her body. But while they were wrapping her hands, one nurse noticed something strange." Alao's breath caught in his throat. "What?" he asked, barely able to speak. "She noticed a slight movement in Kemi's fingers," the doctor continued. "At first, we thought it was just a muscle reflex. But when we checked again, we realized her heart had started beating again." Alao jumped to his feet, his eyes wide with shock. What are you saying? My wife is alive?" "Yes, Baba. She had suffered a severe reaction during the surgery, which caused her vitals to drop dangerously low. It was a rare condition where the body temporarily stops responding, making it seem like death. But she was not truly gone." Alao fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "We didn't tell you immediately because we wanted to be sure she would survive," the doctor explained. "We didn't want to raise your hopes too soon." Alao began to shake uncontrollably. He had spent days mourning, believing he had lost his wife, but she was alive. "She is fine now," the doctor continued. "She is awake, responding well to treatment, and we will discharge her soon." Alao covered his mouth with his hands, sobbing uncontrollably. God had answered his prayers. His Kemi was alive. For a brief moment, Alao wanted to shout the news to the entire village, but then another thought crossed his mind. He looked around, seeing the expensive funeral decorations, the hired drummers, the lavish preparations. Kola had spent millions on a funeral for a mother he refused to help when she was sick. No, let him continue. Let him waste his money. Let him believe he had lost her. Alao's eyes darkened with anger. Kola had broken his heart. Kola had abandoned them when they needed him the most. And now, Kola would feel the weight of his actions. He will wait for the corpse that will never come, Alao thought. Then, when he realizes the truth, he will know what it means to suffer. He wiped his tears, stood up, and walked back into the house, silent and unreadable. The morning of the burial arrived, and the entire village was set for the grand funeral. The expensive decorations, the food, the drummers, the mourners dressed in black. It was a ceremony for a queen. But there was one problem. The corpse never arrived. Kola sat under the large canopy, his sunglasses covering his swollen eyes. His guilt had consumed him, but at least, he told himself, he was doing the right thing now. He had spent millions to make this funeral the talk of the town. Yet, as the hours ticked by, an uncomfortable tension filled the air. People whispered among themselves, "What is happening? Why hasn't the body arrived? This is strange. I've never seen a funeral without a corpse before." Even the village elders, who had seen many burials in their lifetime, were puzzled. Kola began to feel uneasy. He got up and walked over to his father, who sat still and silent on the chair, his face expressionless. "Baba," Kola said cautiously, "the hospital hasn't brought Mama's body. Do you know what is causing the delay?" Alao did not look at him. He simply stared ahead. His hands clasped together. "I don't know," he replied flatly. Kola frowned. "What do you mean you don't know? You were the one they called when she passed away. You must have spoken to them." Alao remained silent. Something felt off. Kola's frustration grew. "Fine. Give me the hospital's name and location. I will go there myself and find out what is happening. Or just give me their number. Let me call, please." Alao finally turned to look at him. His eyes were dark, unreadable. "I don't know the hospital's name," he said simply. Kola stared at him in disbelief. "What?" "I said I don't know." Kola felt his body cold. How could his father not know the hospital where his own wife had died? "That's impossible, Baba," Kola said, his voice rising. "They called you. They told you she was gone. How can you not know where she was? Okay, at least please give me their number." Alao ignored him. Kola's hands curled into fists. His patience was running out. "Tell me where the hospital is," he demanded. Alao stood up slowly, turned away, and walked into the house, closing the door behind him. Kola was stunned. What was happening? Something was wrong. Something wasn't adding up. As the hours passed, the murmurs amongst the villagers grew louder. This is not normal. How can they arrange a funeral without a body? This has never happened in our village before. But the most shocking thing was that, even though there was no corpse, people still ate. Those who had come only for the food quietly helped themselves to plates of rice, meat, and drinks. The body didn't come, but the food came, one man muttered, stuffing a piece of meat into his mouth. Another woman nodded. "What can we do? We have already dressed for a burial. At least let us eat and be satisfied." By evening, the funeral gathering started to scatter. People shook their heads, confused by what they had just witnessed. The funeral had been held. Money had been spent, but there was no dead body. Some even whispered that something spiritual was at play. "This is not ordinary," an old woman murmured. "Maybe the spirit has refused to let her be buried." Kola sat in his chair, his hands covering his face, his mind racing with questions. Where was his mother's body? Why was his father acting so strange? Something was terribly wrong, but he couldn't understand what it was. And finally, exhausted and defeated, Kola made a decision. He would return to the city. Maybe once he was away from the village, he would be able to think clearly. The next morning, Kola left the village. He drove his expensive car down the dusty road, his mind troubled and restless. Everything felt wrong. The missing corpse, the father's strange behavior, the murmurs of the villagers. Nothing made sense. As soon as he reached the city, he picked up his phone and called his father. The phone rang and rang, but Alao did not answer. Kola tried again. Nothing. He called again and again and again. Still nothing. His father was ignoring him. Kola felt a cold fear creep into his chest. What was happening? What was his father hiding? His gut feeling told him that something wasn't right. But little did he know, the truth was far more shocking than he could ever imagine. Ever since he left the village, Kola's mind had been in turmoil. His father's silence was haunting him. Why wouldn't he answer his calls? Why hadn't the corpse arrived for burial? Why had his father refused to tell him the hospital's name? None of it made sense. And the more he thought about it, the more he felt like he was losing his mind. At night, he couldn't sleep. During the day, he couldn't focus. Even at work, he found himself staring blankly at his computer screen, replaying everything over and over. Something was wrong. And after weeks of failed attempts to reach his father, Kola couldn't take it anymore. "I have to go back," he finally decided. "I need to see things for myself." So one morning, he packed his bags, got into his luxurious car, and drove back to the village. But nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to witness. As Kola pulled into the village, he noticed something strange. Villagers were gathered in groups, whispering in shock, looking at him with knowing eyes. He felt a chill run down his spine. "Why are they staring at me like that?" he muttered. Then, as he drove closer to his father's compound, he froze. Standing outside the house, dressed in a beautiful new wrapper, looking healthier than ever, was his mother, Kemi. Kola's heart stopped. His breath caught in his throat. His hands began to shake on the steering wheel. It couldn't be. He had buried her. He had spent millions on her funeral. His mother was dead. So how was she standing there, alive and well? His mouth opened, but no words came out. Then, before he could stop himself, he screamed and bolted out of the car, running as fast as he could. "It's a ghost!" he cried in terror. "Mama's ghost has come for me!" Villagers burst into laughter as they watched Kola run like a madman. Kemi, shocked by his reaction, called after him, "Kola, my son, come back, I am alive." But Kola kept running, his mind unable to process what he had just seen. Finally, after a few moments of pure panic, he felt a strong hand grab his arm. He jerked away violently, panting heavily, only to see his father, Alao, staring at him coldly. "Stop this foolishness," Alao said sternly. "Your mother is alive." Kola's chest rose and fell rapidly. He turned his gaze back to Kemi, who was now walking towards him, her eyes filled with emotions. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't a trick. She was real. Kola staggered back in disbelief, his legs giving out beneath him. He fell to his knees, staring at her with wide, teary eyes. The whole village was in shock when Kemi returned home a few days earlier. The same woman they had mourned, the same woman whose son had organized the grandest funeral. And now she was back, alive, healthy, and even richer than before. Thanks to the NGO that had saved her life, Kemi had been given a lot of money, food supplies, and medical care to help her recover fully. When she arrived in the village, people screamed in fear. Some ran away, while others stood frozen in shock. One old woman even fainted on the spot, believing she was seeing a spirit. But when they realized it was truly her, news spread like wildfire. She survived. The doctors made a mistake, but Kola already held her funeral. Now, as Kola knelt before his living mother, he felt like the biggest fool. Kola's lips trembled. His whole body shook with guilt and regret. "Mama," he whispered, his voice breaking. You are alive?" Kemi nodded slowly, her eyes filled with tears. "Yes, I am alive," she said softly. Kola's heart shattered into pieces. For weeks, he had been crying over her death, blaming himself for abandoning her. For weeks, he had been spending money like a madman, trying to make up for his failures. And all this time, she had been alive. "Mama," he sobbed, crawling closer. I am so sorry." Kemi's face darkened with disappointment. "Kola," she said, her voice firm, "do you know how much you hurt us? Do you know how much you hurt me?" Kola bowed his head, ashamed. "You left us when we needed you," she continued. "You abandoned your father. You abandoned me." Kola covered his face with his hands, sobbing uncontrollably. "I was blind, Mama," he cried. "I was foolish. I was carried away by money and city life. I failed you. I am so sorry." Kemi looked at Alao, who still stood with his arms crossed, his face hard as stone. Kola turned to his father, but the look in the old man's eyes wasn't one of love. It was pure disappointment. "Baba, please," Kola begged. "Please forgive me." Alao was silent for a long time. Then finally, he spoke. "We suffered for you, Kola," he said quietly. "We gave you everything. We sacrificed our dignity, our health, our happiness, so that you could have a better life." Kola lowered his head in shame. "But what did you do in return?" Alao continued, his voice filled with pain. "When your mother needed you, you were too busy. When I begged you to come home, you refused. When she was dying, you sent small money and called it enough." Kola sobbed harder, his whole body shaking. Alao stepped forward, his eyes cold and filled with finality. "I have only one thing to say to you, Kola," he said. Kola looked up, desperate for hope. Alao stared straight into his son's eyes and said, "You are no longer my son." Kola froze. His world collapsed. His father had just disowned him. He turned to his mother, searching for hope, but even Kemi looked away, her heart broken. Kola felt like the ground beneath him had disappeared. What had he done? Would his father ever forgive him? Would his mother even accept him again? Or had he truly lost them forever? I hope you enjoyed this story. Click to watch the next one. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.